Welcome to China Truths. Today we will bring you the following stories. EU set to impose up to 45% tariffs on China-made EVs. US lawmakers call for risk assessment of China's Photonic chipmakers. New US administration will continue long-standing support of Taiwan. US Coast Guard to expand presence and cooperation in Indo-Pacific amid China concerns. Now, let's dive into the details. It's all covered in today's China Truths. EU set to impose up to 45% tariffs on China-made EVs. The European Union (EU) announced on October 29 that it is ready to collect extra customs duties on electric vehicles (EVs) made in China after months-long negotiations with Beijing failed to address the issue identified by the bloc's investigation. Starting from October 31, the new duties of up to 35%, on top of the standard 10%, will come into force. These definitive duties will remain in place for the next 5 years. The European Commission, which is concluding a probe of EV import from China, has said extra duties are necessary to counter heavy subsidies provided by Beijing that threaten to hurt the EU market by artificially lowering the prices. Despite the introduction of the definitive tariffs, Olaf Gill, the Commission's trade spokesperson, said the negotiations between Brussels and Beijing will continue. Any such solution would have to be effective in addressing the problem identified by the investigation, as well as World Trade Organization, WTO, compatible, Gill told reporters on October 29. The final decision released on the Commission's website outlined the specific tariff rates for various automakers, which will be added to the standard 10% duty applied to all imported cars. Chinese EV giant BYD will incur a customs duty of 17%, while Geely, owner of Volvo and Polestar, will see a slightly higher tariff of 18.8%. SAIC, the Chinese state-owned company that acquired Britain's MG, one of Europe's top-selling EVs, will face the steepest rate of 35.3%. In contrast, Tesla, the American EV manufacturer with a gigafactory in Shanghai, will be subject to the lowest duty of 7.8%. Other Chinese EV makers deemed cooperative by the Commission will face tariffs of 20.7%, while those considered non-cooperative will be hit with the steepest 35.3% duties. This decision will become law once it is published in the EU's official journal, which is expected to happen on October 30. China has filed a complaint with the WTO over the EU's proposal and held 8 rounds of negotiations with Brussels in a bid to avoid the tariff hikes. China's Ministry of Commerce has initiated its own anti-dumping investigations against various imported products from the bloc, including pork and dairy, which could lead to tariffs on exports to China. Beijing has imposed provisional measures targeting EU brandy imports, the Commerce Ministry announced on October 8, days after EU leaders gave the green light to the EV duties proposals. The EU has said it would challenge China's decision at the WTO, pledging to confront any unfair use of trade defense instruments against its economy with utmost seriousness. By imposing these tariffs, the EU risks more retaliatory measures from Beijing. Yet analysts suggest that the tariffs could deliver a significant blow to the Chinese government. This move sends a clear signal: China's strategy of leveraging state subsidies and exports to fuel its EV industry may be running out of steam. David Huang, a US-based researcher focusing on China's trade policy, said ahead of the EU's announcement. However, the implications of this move may extend beyond trade. Huang said Beijing's intention to develop EVs, referred to as new energy vehicles by Beijing, has nothing to do with improving air quality or reducing carbon emissions, as more than half of China's energy comes from coal. Most of the electricity used to charge these EVs relies on coal-fired power generation and hydropower generation in China, which are actually more polluting than gasoline, Huang said, pointing out that Beijing just employs the new energy narrative as a means to mislead the international community. With the EU aligning itself with the United States and other countries to intensify scrutiny of China's trade policies, Huang said, the prospect of using EVs as bargaining chips in climate negotiations with other countries is becoming less viable. US lawmakers call for risk assessment of China's Photonic chipmakers. A bipartisan group of lawmakers has urged the Commerce Department to find ways to protect U.S. photonic chip technologies from Chinese threats and competition. In a letter dated October 27, the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party said the technology has the potential to upend the semiconductor industry and redefine battle lines in China's technological competition with the United States, rendering moot the Biden administration's export control rules on chips and creating a critical choke point for future semiconductor supply chains. The committee asked Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo to consider investigating China-based leading photonics entities and imposing export controls on silicon photonics equipment and products. Silicon photonics rely on light particles, which travel much faster than electrons, to transmit information. The concept has been around for decades, but the development and production of photonic chips have stalled because of the unique set of challenges involved. With electronic semiconductors nearing their physical limits, the industry has refocused its effort on developing photonic chips in recent years in a bid to unlock more computing power while consuming less energy. Leading artificial intelligence (AI) chip companies such as NVIDIA and Advanced Micro Devices have published research on how to integrate photonics into their chips, while Silicon Valley startup Lightmatter recently raised $400 million for its photonic technology, pushing the company's value to $4.4 billion. China has also been aggressively pursuing the technology, with Guangdong Province recently joining a spate of funding programs aimed at building photonic chips in China, according to Chinese state media. Unlike advanced electronic chips, the production of photonic chips does not require high-precision lithography systems that are needed to etch millions of tiny circuits onto silicon wafers. It gives Chinese companies one more incentive to develop photonic chips, as advanced lithography systems are effectively banned from being exported to China. The design, processing, packaging, and testing of the photonic chip were all completed domestically, freeing China from dependence on foreign advanced lithography machines. It is a core technology for China to change lanes and overtake in the chip field, by Bing, whose startup made China's first photonic chip, was quoted as saying in 2019 by Chinese state media. The hope that China can change lanes and overtake using silicon photonics was parroted by Qinwen Ling, an economist at the state-backed think tank the China Center for International Economic Exchange, and Chinese media outlets. According to Chinese state media, in 2022, Chinese leader Xi Jinping described the industry as a strategic high-tech industry in which China is equipped to make the first breakthroughs. In the past year, Beijing's Tsinghua University said its researchers have made a light-based chip that's 3,000 times faster than NVIDIA's A100, the most widely used commercial AI chip, which is subject to U.S. sanctions on China. The university said the chip also consumes 4 million times less energy than NVIDIA's A100, and it was made with a cheap 20-year-old fabrication process instead of advanced machines that China cannot access. In April, Tsinghua unveiled an optical AI chiplet called Tai-Chi, which it said has up to 2 to 3 orders of magnitude improvement in area efficiency and energy efficiency compared to current AI chips. The commercialization of the technology has also been underway. A government-backed pilot production line, launched by the Chip Hub for Integrated Photonics 4, began operating on September 25. Another Chinese company, Syntone, is also building a photonic chips production line in Tianjin that is expected to begin production in 2025, Syntone's CEO, Sui Jun, told Chinese state media. According to an analysis published in January by Washington-based think tank the Center for Strategic and International Studies, it's unlikely that photonic chips will replace electronic chips anytime soon. But recent developments suggest that could present China at least a partial path to the leading edge of semiconductor manufacturing that does not require the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Representative John Molinar, a Republican from Michigan, chairman of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, and Representative Raja Krishnamurti, a Democrat from Illinois, ranking member of the committee, said in their letter that the Commerce Department should consider investigating leading Chinese photonics companies, adding that companies designing equipment for China's photonic chip production are potentially operating directly contrary to U.S. national security and foreign policy interests, and U.S. technology should not further support these efforts. They also recommended explicitly including photonics technology and photonic chips on the department's list of controlled technologies because the dual-use nature of photonics technology makes it particularly susceptible to military end-use diversion by problematic actors. Raimondo was asked to address the committee by December 1, answering questions such as her assessment of national security risks posed by China's silicon photonics industry, the industry's situation in the United States, and the resources needed to carry out the task. New U.S. administration will continue long-standing support of Taiwan. The top American diplomat in Taiwan said the next U.S. administration will likely maintain the current policy toward the island nation, ensuring stability and continuity in U.S. Taiwan relations. Raymond Green, director of the American Institute in Taiwan, AIT, which functions as the U.S. Embassy in the absence of formal diplomatic ties between Washington and Taipei, gave a wide-ranging interview in Mandarin to local YouTube program Mindy World News aired on October 27. "I'm actually not so worried about whether the new president, whether that be Vice President Harris or former President Trump, will change course," he said, responding to a question about whether he believed a new U.S. administration would change the AIT's works. Green said the U.S. Taiwan relations have received bipartisan support since the signing of the Taiwan Relations Act in 1979, noting that in Congress, every time there was a bill related to Taiwan, it was passed by an overwhelming majority. "So nobody in Congress or our political circle is opposing the relationship between the United States and Taiwan," he said. In other words, U.S. military support for Taiwan and the economic ties between the two sides will continue, Green said. Washington severed diplomatic ties with Taipei in favor of Beijing in 1979. However, the two sides have enjoyed a robust relationship based on the Taiwan Relations Act, a law that authorizes the United States to provide the island with military equipment for self-defense. On October 25, the United States approved another arms sale to Taiwan. The new package, worth nearly $2 billion, consisted of 2 radar systems and the first-time delivery of an advanced surface-to-air missile system. Taiwan's foreign ministry issued a statement thanking Washington for continuing to provide the island with defensive weaponry. It noted that the latest arms sale marks the 17th military deal the Biden administration authorized. China's foreign ministry hit back in a statement on October 26, saying that the latest arms sale undermines China's sovereignty and security interests. Beijing claims Taiwan as its territory and has not renounced the use of military force to seize the self-ruled island. Green dismissed the likelihood of a full-fledged war across the Taiwan Strait. "Certainly, we should avoid an all-out war, but I think the possibility of that happening is quite low," he said, adding that Taiwan's military reforms and U.S. deployments in the Pacific have all posed a deterrence against a potential Chinese invasion. "Most countries do not want to see any problems across the Taiwan Strait. And they also don't want to see any changes to the cross-strait status quo," he said. Earlier this month, China launched a large-scale, one-day military exercise around the island, deploying its Navy, Air Force, Rocket Force, and Coast Guard. The exercise drew international condemnation, with the Pentagon calling it irresponsible, disproportionate, and destabilizing. Taiwanese Defense Minister Wellington Koo warned last week that aside from an invasion, the Chinese regime could impose a blockade to try to compel Taiwan to surrender. However, such an action would be considered an act of war. In response to Woo's comment, Representative Mark Green, a Republican from Tennessee, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, wrote on X, "We must treat Communist China's aggression against Taiwan seriously. A strong American military is the best deterrent to escalation." Beijing has also been engaging in gray zone operations against Taiwan. On October 29, China Coast Guard vessels intruded into restricted waters near Taiwan's offshore island of Kinmen, Taiwan's Coast Guard Administration, CGA, said in a statement, adding that the latest incident marks the 48th intrusion in waters off Kinmen and another offshore island of Matsu this year. The CGA said China's latest move has exacerbated cross-strait estrangement and called on Beijing to stop similar intrusive measures that undermine cross-strait peace. Also, on October 29, the AIT announced that its Washington office managing director Ingrid Larson was visiting Taiwan for meetings from October 28 to November 1. Larson's trip is as part of the United States' strong commitment to Taiwan and to advance growing U.S. Taiwan partnership, the AIT said. While in Taiwan, she will discuss continued U.S. Taiwan collaboration on issues of mutual interest such as regional security, mutually beneficial trade and investment, and people-to-people, educational, and cultural ties. U.S. Coast Guard to expand presence and cooperation in Indo-Pacific amid China concerns. The U.S. Coast Guard said that it intends to send specialized forces, training teams, and other capacity-building assets to help Indo-Pacific allies bolster their ability to safeguard exclusive economic zones and protect their natural resources from exploitation, according to the Coast Guard 2024 Operational Posture Report released on October 25. The report states that the region remains a top regional priority for the United States, citing its geostrategic importance, vital role in global trade, and the need to ensure a free, open, and rules-based maritime order. We are expanding our presence and cooperation in Southeast and South Asia, with a focus on advising, training, deployment, and capacity building, the Coast Guard stated, while also pledging to continue to support its allies' efforts in combating predatory fishing practices. The report comes amid growing concerns over China's military assertiveness in the region but did not mention China by name. It stated that the United States aims to boost the capacity of regional coast guards to support them in countering malign influence, enforcing their laws, and addressing their priority interests such as climate change. According to the report, the Coast Guard will deploy its national security cutters, the centerpiece of its fleet, to the Western Pacific and move the 270-foot Harriet Lane cutter to the Indo-Pacific. The Coast Guard will also maintain operations of fast response cutters and buoy tenders in Oceania. During an October 18 press conference, U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin warned that China's increasingly coercive behavior in the Indo-Pacific could have implications for the whole world and that cooperation with Indo-Pacific allies has become vital. We're also troubled by the growing alignment between Russia and the People's Republic of China, including the PRC's support for indefensible war of choice against Ukraine, and that makes our close cooperation with our Indo-Pacific friends more vital than ever, he stated. China has been criticized for its increasingly aggressive actions against its neighboring countries, particularly Taiwan, the Philippines, and Japan. Last month, China conducted joint military drills with Russian naval and air forces in the Sea of Japan and the Sea of Okhotsk, north of Japan's Hokkaido Island, aiming to boost their strategic military cooperation and enhance the ability to jointly respond to security threats. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense has reported a surge in Chinese military activity around the island in recent months. On October 27, the ministry said it had detected 22 Chinese military aircraft and 7 vessels near the island's vicinity, with 17 of the aircraft spotted crossing the median line of the Taiwan Strait. On October 10, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. criticized Chinese coast guards for blasting horns, firing water cannons, and ramming Philippine maritime boats during 3 separate clashes near the disputed Sabina Shoal, also known as Sien Bin in Beijing and Escoda in Manila. The United States announced last week $8 million in new funding to modernize the Philippines Coast Guard, PCG, following the U.S.-Philippines Maritime Dialogue held in Manila on October 24. The funding will be used to support the PCG's infrastructure enhancement, training program development, and resource acquisition and management planning, according to an October 28 statement by the U.S. Embassy in Manila. During the meeting, delegates from the 2 countries reviewed ongoing cooperative efforts and discussed ways to address maritime concerns in the disputed South China Sea. Both sides underscored the importance of upholding the 2016 arbitral award on the South China Sea, which ruled in favor of the Philippines in its legal action against China and declared that Beijing's sovereignty claims had no legal basis. Beijing has refused to accept or recognize the ruling. Beijing has asserted territorial claims over nearly the entire South China Sea, including reefs and islands that overlap with the exclusive economic zones of Vietnam, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Don't forget to comment in the section below to share your opinions on today's topic with us.